Hello, everyone. I'm Hannah Steiman, president of Peak Support. Thank you for joining us at the Peak Experience, our podcast where we talk about the customer experience, the customer service agent experience, and everything in between. And I'm really excited today to talk to Stacy Justino. She has had a 20-year career leading customer service teams in both gaming and the software industry. And today we're going to focus on gaming, where she started as a customer support agent at Big Fish Games and grew to eventually manage the entire customer support team. And she also works as a career counselor for folks in customer support. So we're going to talk a lot about how her journey and her advice for folks who are thinking about making the same journey or wanting to step up in their careers in player support. So Stacy Justino, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, happy to be here. So as Hannah mentioned, I started my career as a customer support rep at Big Fish Games and eventually ended up leading the department of 70 people over the course of almost 10 years. And started out as PC Mac downloadable games business and then eventually grew into being a mobile free-to-play business while also supporting legacy business lines.
Awesome. So talk about that journey. First of all, how big was the Big Fish Games customer support team when you first joined as an agent?
It was between like 45 and 50 people. We were supporting live chat, email, and phones for one business line of PC Mac downloadable games.
And before we really get into some of the nitty gritty about the operations of Big Fish Games, talk about your own career experience. So that's that's obviously must have involved multiple promotions in between to go from agent to customer service manager. So talk about what that was like. Why do you think you were able to do that? What were some of the strategies that you used to really dive in, perform well, and become a leader at such a significant company?
Yeah, I think, when I started, I had no technical support experience, no direct customer support experience. I'd done tangentially related jobs, worked at a information desk in college. And so just wanted to work at a video game company and got a job there, and a team lead position opened up. I decided to apply, and the director of the department actually said, "Hey, we were actually thinking that we would love you to be an interview candidate for our tier 2 technical support specialist role." And I was floored. I was like, me? Me? And I look back and I think that one of the things that stood out is my sort of curiosity and being a little bit proactive. I remember very distinctly, I was working on Mac support tickets, and we had this bug. We couldn't reproduce it. And then one customer said this almost throwaway line. I was doing 85 to 90 tickets a day, so pretty steady clip. And I noticed that they said, "Hey, this happened after I updated QuickTime." So I went to our Mac testing desktop, and I looked to see what version of QuickTime that machine was on. It wasn't the most recent one. I learned that day that QuickTime is not an application on Macs that auto updates whenever you install the whatever updates. You have to sort of manually do it unless there's a forced update. I updated it, opened that game, went to the chapter in the game that the people reported the problem, and was able to reproduce it, escalated it, and the game was fixed when QuickTime had a new version come out. And I think that always sticks out to me. And that's something that I always a story I tell people earlier in their careers about, an example of how you can have an impact beyond just answering customers and, can really make a difference. And that those are the things that people remember when they're thinking about who is eligible for promotion, who would be a good fit for an elevated role on the team. And so started out as a team lead after that, and then eventually was asked to take on the quality and training team, as well as basically became sort of the de facto owner for emerging businesses. So when we ported our first games to the iPhone, so this was brand new for everybody on planet Earth, supporting games on mobile devices. I spun up our support team for that and did the same for free to play, did the same when we went into the social casino market, and then that's kind of how eventually the whole team ended up reporting.
That's so interesting. And that example, that's such a powerful example and such a great example of proactivity. And really also, I think, speaks to the importance of active listening, because it would have been easy to sort of see that as a throwaway or just sort of try to say, maybe be thinking about what you're going to say next. For example, it's so easy. So often those things we're trying to get to the next stage and we just don't even hear it. So really speaks to just sort of the power of really paying close attention and noticing these details.
Yeah, I can agree more.
It's interesting also to me that you didn't come in with technical support experience. Do you think that in the gaming customer support world, folks need to come in with technical support experience?
I think by and large, no. Um, if you have good documentation, somebody can get up to speed on what they need to know. I remember the technical training at the time, and everything that was covered in the technical training was in our public facing help center documentation. The one thing I did learn is how to run a DX diag on a PC machine, and then how to read that to figure out what driver updates or whether a system was not like powerful enough to handle the games that we were selling customers. But everything else I either was able to learn or teach people. And what it really came down to is sort of that curiosity, that sort of active listening, being able to identify a problem and then find the solution. But those are traits that you can pick up in a wide variety of backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what about as a team lead and then as a QA manager? Are there examples you can think of there that enabled you to really stand out to get promoted to increasingly higher levels?
Yeah, I think on the quality program management piece, as an agent, I was always really wanting to make sure my quality was good and make sure that whatever feedback I was getting from the quality specialist or my manager, that I was doing my best to implement them. So I think that was one thing. I think also I made sure that I really understood the rubric that I was being held to, right? This is my performance standard. I should understand this. And when I was unsure of something, I would ask clarifying questions, right? And so that led to me as a team lead being one of the small group of people.
I think it's also really interesting the point you made, because I think a lot of customer service agents, it's a more entry level role and folks might feel uncomfortable about asking questions. They might think, oh, I should already know the answer to that. But actually, if you're wondering, there's a really good chance that someone else is wondering. And therefore it's an important question to bring up. And it's something that the organization should probably clarify.
Exactly. And I think developing a culture where people feel comfortable speaking up about those things is really critical in that too.
Yeah. What advice would you have to someone who is maybe interested in stepping up to the team lead role, but maybe afraid they're not going to get it, afraid they're not ready? What advice would you have to someone who's looking to take those steps in their career, the next step in their career? Maybe wanting looking for a promotion, looking to fill a more senior role that's open.
Yeah, I think that one thing is to talk to your manager who's in that role. Let them know you're interested. Let them know you want to learn more, and talk to them about what it's really like. Right? I think a lot of times people think that is the next step for everyone. It doesn't have to be, and so really kind of figuring out like, oh, is this something I do want to pursue? Let me figure out what that job really entails. Is it what I think it is? And then you can kind of figure out like, okay, do I already have those skills? And how can I showcase those skills in my day-to-day job? Because I think like that's the thing I learned from my career trajectory is I was exhibiting these traits and skills in my current role, and also really important, excelling in my current role, but showcasing that I do have what it takes to succeed as a team lead, as a manager. So I think that that's pretty critical. And most of the time, I would think if you're in a supportive customer support team, there are opportunities to highlight how awesome you are and how you would really be a good fit for that sort of team lead role. So taking initiative, like we talked about earlier, surfacing things that maybe aren't working well with the team. And if you have suggestions, well, we might be able to do them better. As a leader, some of the most impactful changes I've made have come from one-on-ones with people on the team, right? And so I think when a position opens up, like I said, those moments are what the hiring manager, the head of the department remember, right? When they're thinking about people who they would want to encourage to apply.
Yeah. Yeah, that proactivity I think is so important. As a leader, you want folks who are raising their hands, who are proactively coming up with issues and coming up with solutions to them.
I think the one other piece too is being a champion of your teammates, being a good mentor and coach to your teammates. That is directly transferable to a leadership role.
Yeah, absolutely. And that can also ease the transition into a leadership role too, because sometimes it's hard to move from a peer to a leader. But if you already have that coaching relationship with folks, that really smooths the way. So let's switch gears a little bit and just talk about the challenges of running a growing support team. And what I think is so interesting too is that you were in a period, kind of like the period we're in now, where technology was rapidly changing. So it's so fascinating. You started in the PC and Mac download world and then moved into the iPhone world. Just talk about some of the challenges of managing a support team through such a significant transition and change, specifically in the gaming industry.
Yeah, I think one of the sort of things that stands out to me is so when we started PC Mac downloadable games, target customer was women between the ages of 35 and 70. So imagine helping your aunts, moms, and grandmas with computer issues. And we also had a game forum. So imagine moderating a forum of that audience.
Yeah.
Uh,
I can
so
imagine. I have an aunt. Who I help with technical issues, so I can very well imagine that.
Exactly. So started out with really long support emails. Everybody was checking reading these on their computers, right, on a big screen. And since a lot of these folks weren't technologically savvy, we spent a lot of time building trust in those emails. So explaining why this problem was happening, and then providing a solution, very detailed step-by-step instructions, because they want to have confidence that the steps they follow aren't going to mess up their computer even more than their computer is in the current state. Um, so that really worked for that audience, right? But then mobile, so not just the mobile customers, but also the PC Mac customers are now reading our responses on their phones. So these long emails require you to scroll, scroll, scroll. And for mobile gaming, the audience is much wider, much more diverse, and they just want their problem fixed. They don't actually really care why they didn't get the game credit. They don't really care why they're experiencing lag. They just want it fixed. So we needed to sort of switch how we operated in that regard. And we actually enlisted our user research team to say, hey, we have this hypothesis. We think we want to move towards shorter emails where we are just leading with the solution, and then we can provide more context if it seems applicable. And they surveyed existing customers from all of our customer bases, and then like customers, non-customers, and basically came back kind of 50-50 in terms of like really wanting a detailed explanation. So we thought it would be pretty safe to experiment with going towards shorter, more succinct emails. And then people wrote back and said, hey, but why is this happening? We could then provide that context for them. And we made that shift. And we still had a CSAT of 90% or above, but our team was able to be more efficient and productive. And since 80% of our business was now mobile free to play, we were doing a better job of aligning with sort of the business needs. And it also made cross training so much easier because you didn't have to like, oh, I was supporting PC Mac. Now I have to like relearn how to do this for mobile. It was much more like a similar framework and sort of process. And then that also meant that our quality standards, we could have one set of quality standards regardless of business line. And if there were idiosyncrasies between or differences, we would put that in the internal documentation of our standards. Say, hey, for free to play, addressing all of the customers' questions or needs, this is how it might look for free to play versus PC Mac.
That's so interesting, and I feel like that's probably relevant for a lot of gaming companies, which might have multiple audiences across different games. One thing we hear from a lot of gaming CX leaders is that, and this is true in a lot of other industries besides gaming, but especially in gaming, you might release a game, it's a huge hit, and you didn't really think about customer support in the beginning. And so customer support is a little bit of an afterthought, and it can be kind of haphazard as a result. It's not necessarily getting the development resources that other parts of the firm are getting. It's sometimes built a little bit of a hodgepodge rather than kind of built in a strategic way from the beginning. Is that something that you found at Big Fish Games? And if so, how did you navigate that?
Yes, yes. And a lot of times, I think what's kind of important here is you don't know if the game's going to be a hit, right? So, especially when we were going into new business lines, new spaces, we didn't want to like over engineer everything, right? So you kind of start lean. You do a lot of times. We had the benefit of having a very established process for our PC Mac downloadable games business. So we could take some of our learnings and some of our processes, but didn't want to put so much time and effort for a game or a type of game that didn't end up taking off. So at first, it was a lot of, okay, we are going to Slack the producer, the QA team that's working on this game, and it'd be a lot of communication directly with our counterparts and other teams supporting that game. And then as things sort of scaled, right? So as we sort of, for example, mobile free to play, we then built out weekly reporting that our business analyst would send out every week. As we, for example, with mobile free to play, as we kind of got more up to speed, got into a more regular cadence, and we were releasing more games in that space because that was the direction the business was going, we put into place weekly reporting that got sent to all of the free to play product managers, game producers, and QA leads. And for each game, it would say what was the contact rate. So we would look at support tickets created as a percentage of weekly active users, and then what were the top ticket categories for each of those. And then we'd call out anything specific in the sort of email that got sent out. So every team was getting sort of an update from support on what was happening. And they had sort of targets around, and our team did, around what contact rate should be in terms of being able to control sort of costs and what was considered sort of like product quality wise acceptable. And so that was really helpful. And once we got to that point, to have that go out every week. And then I think as things go on, as we knew what was sort of different about supporting those business lines or specific games, we were able to develop a free-to-play specific training. So at first, we would hire people at PC Mac downloadable games agents, and eventually they would cross-train in social casino or free-to-play. But, when we started to have like a big hit in one of our casino games, we're like, okay, we don't have time to wait for someone to go through the legacy business training and onboarding and then cross-train. So we started hiring directly into those other business lines.
Yeah, interesting. And one of the things I noticed about what you said is it sounds like you were very thoughtful about how you communicated to external stakeholders outside of the customer support team. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about how you thought about that, especially when you were managing the team, because I think, number one, CX is often seen as a cost center. And so it can be a struggle for CX leaders to kind of fight against that and get resources, as well as I mentioned before, getting technical resources. If you need help from the technical team, their primary priority is the game. So I'm curious how you thought about that as a leader, and what were some of the approaches you used?
Yeah. Well, the one thing that really sticks with me is I went to my first support conference, Elevate CX, and one of the talks was about using the language of the teams you're working with when you're communicating with them. And this was such an aha moment for me because I was like, this is what I tell teams all the time. This is how I approach giving customer support. You need to use the language of the people you're speaking to, of your audience. And I'd never really taken the time to think about, this actually applies to how I communicate and we communicate with other teams. So one really example that sticks with me is one of these free-to-play games. There was this bug that was corrupting the profiles, and it was only impacting people who were like level 30 or above. So people who had spent money, people who have been playing the game for a long time. And we had to send a list of the user IDs to the game producer, who would then send it to the developer. And the developer, a few times a week, would have to go into the game database and uncorrupt these profiles. And the game developer is really focused on new features, new events. And so there was often a delay or a backlog. And we had communicated this to the producer, and we hadn't really gotten any traction. And one of the associate managers who managed one of our free-to-play teams and I were just sort of frustrated around this. The team was frustrated around this. And so I thought back to that talk I had listened to, and really tried to frame it, because we were framing it in terms of number of tickets, right? And time to get back to customers. Well, that doesn't translate so well. So, we took that and we were able to sort of reframe it as, well, these people are locked out of their game. The X percentage of these are paying users, and really translated it into like the real business impact. And customers not being getting a resolution. Those are business impact, but we needed to translate them into the sort of key sort of indicators and performance metrics that mattered to that team.
Yeah. So less about the pain points for you on the customer support team, but about the pain point for the customer and what that actually means for the customer.
And the company, yes.
And the company, yeah. Sorry, and the company. I mean, yes, that's really interesting. That's a great example. You brought up these VIPs. The players who, these high tier. Every game company, every game might call them something a little bit different. But did you have a tiered support system for VIP players?
Yeah. So for our social casino business, for sure. So our whole support team who was supporting those games, we had our Zendesk views set up so that whales, or we called them narwhals, had like a shorter SLA, right? So they would kind of be pushed further to the top. But then a subset of those VIPs were actually handled by our VIP concierge team, which was a little bit shared between like the marketing side and support. So that team ended up being staffed with people who had been social casino support reps. And so they had more one-on-one sort of develop those relationships with those players. They had special promotions for those players, but we definitely treated them a little bit differently.
Yeah. We're mostly run out of time. This has been a really interesting conversation. Any other final notes, advice you would have for CX leaders, player support leaders in the gaming community, or folks who want to break in and want to grow to those leadership roles?
Yeah, I think just kind of what we talked about before is really finding those opportunities where you can add value and be proactive, while still really being exceptional at the core components of your job. Because as somebody who has hired many people, promoted many people, those are the things that always stick out in my mind. I think as you're scaling a support team in the gaming space, I think being really adaptable and being aware of what your customers' needs are. I know that applies to every sort of support team, but I think your audience may shift, right? Depending on maybe you get a big influx of new users because maybe you had a TV commercial and now way more people are experiencing your game. And also, like we were talking about, your volume and your active users could scale overnight. So being able to have a hiring and training process that makes you be able to onboard people quickly and get them up to speed quickly, and having a support team where you have people who are cross-trained so you can get more folks supporting the business or the game that really needs the most people on it at a certain time. I think those are critical for success.
Awesome. Well, Stacy, thank you so much for talking with me today. If folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do it?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to connect with folks.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.